I work actually down the hall. I smell these Friday lunches every Friday. It's the first time I've actually been this close to the pizza. So, the Council on Teacher Ed on campus works administratively with all of the educator licensure programs on campus. And so it's in that capacity that George contacted me because folks across campus are beginning to hear about this particular assessment, and there's a lot of information, a lot of misinformation, a lot of strong feelings by some folks about this assessment. So I happen to be, for better or for worse, assigned as the campus coordinator for this assessment. So I have put together just some general, I anticipated some of the questions most people are likely to have, and have a few points to make about each of these. So, however, you know, if you have pressing questions, things you want to know, I assume you get your issues addressed, and I'll do my best to provide information. So please shout out, jump in, interrupt, whatever, at any point if you want more information. I'm guessing you all mostly know each other, and I don't know exactly what your roles are, so I'm gonna, if I'm giving you information that's too detailed, you know, looks super glazed over, and then I'll try to lighten it up a little, because I'm just kind of guessing at what level of interest and depth would be appropriate. So, so at any rate, what is this Ed-TPA thing, and why are we hearing about it now? What it is a multiple measure assessment that is designed with the intent of documenting and scoring instances of teaching done by student teachers. It was developed originally by SCALE, which is the Stanford Center, and it has a very long history. It was I believe maybe 30 or so years ago were some of the initial attempts to develop an assessment of this nature. And what the SCALE faculty were doing was trying to come up with a way that they could gather data to use as program faculty to look at the quality of preparation experiences that they were offering to their candidates as a whole. So it was initially developed as an assessment not focused on individual high stakes, which I'll talk about in a minute, but was really developed with the intent of informing college faculty about whether they were getting the outcomes they were hoping for. And so that was its original design came out of the desire for that to happen. It was developed collaboratively with their K-12 school partners and cooperating teachers and teacher educators. They also involved representative discipline-specific people in the development of this. And as folks that I'll talk about in a minute have kind of gotten a hold of this particular assessment, and you began to use it for a variety of other purposes, other folks have gotten involved as well. Again, originally it was designed for elementary ed program faculty at Stanford to get a look at their programs. Now, as it's grown, it's a nationwide, multidiscipline, I don't know, there are 30-some handbooks, everything from agriculture education to bilingual to elementary ed. So to attempt to fit the assessment to each of those disciplines, they've got, that's what SPA, specialty area representatives, they've gotten folks involved when they took it from just this one place to make it a more national thing. They've involved all of those various partners or players in its development. So why are we hearing about it now? I've got to say politics is why we're hearing about it now. I probably don't need to go into great depth. Most of you who have an involvement with education understand that pretty much anybody who's ever attended school knows more about how it should be done than the folks who actually do that for a living. And so it's in that context that public scrutinies have been applied to the outcomes of our instruction at the classroom teacher level. Well, now we then have to blame somebody else, so now we'll blame the teacher educators. They must not be preparing people well. And on that political ride that we've been on, a lot of it is fueled by the federal Race to the Top funds that were made available several years ago. A lot of states have gotten on this bandwagon of we need to assess and quantify and measure and do all of these things for teachers and for K-12 kids and for college students and whoever else they can think of to do that for. Whether that's associated with improved outcomes is a question that you don't have the answer. I don't have the answer to. One would hope that it is, but I don't know that that's true necessarily. It is true, however, though, that here in Illinois, as well as in many other states, politicians have decided that this would be a really good thing to have happen in the state. And our Illinois politicians decided to take a policy approach that is individually consequential, meaning it's this assessment is going to be applied to an individual candidate and they have to pass it to have eligibility to get a license. There's a number of other things that they have to do to be able to get a license as well, but this is getting what they consider a passing score on this assessment is one of them. Simply for comparison, contrast, looking at other states in which to live, that's not necessarily the approach that's recommended by the Stanford faculty for how to use this assessment. It's not the approach that is taken in many, many other states in the United States. And the developers of the assessment, themselves, having had a few personal conversations, would not have suggested that this is an appropriate use of this particular instrument. But our Illinois legislators seem to have better information than us, and here we are. So we're hearing about it now, big time now, because as a part of Illinois' application for Race to the Top funds, as well as their political attempts to do things like increase rigor by increasing testing, and there's probably some other things on the legislative agenda. But those were the things they focused on. The law requiring this of candidates became effective September 1st, 2015. So the way the law in Illinois reads now is that any candidate for a new license has to have achieved a particular score on this assessment to be eligible. The candidates have always had to pass a variety of tests. They've had to pass a content area test before they're allowed to begin their student teaching. There's a different test called an assessment of a professional teaching, which is a kind of a multiple, selected response kind of an assessment that they were to take at the end of student teaching. There's a test that they have to pass before they can even enter a program. So the idea of testing teacher candidates isn't necessarily a new one, but this particular requirement is just new in the state. Other states also, other states who are requiring candidates to do this assessment are sometimes, some other options than making it individually consequential. There are a number of states where it's programmatically consequential, and what I mean by that is all of the candidates who graduate have to take this assessment, but the people who are accountable for their scores is the university program. As opposed to, and in Illinois, we're also accountable for their scores, so they've got us too. But in some states, it's only at the program level. So what would happen is, let's say that you graduated 100 teacher candidates and they would take of those 100, they'd run up what your institution scores, and they would say, well, of the 100 candidates that graduated at the University of Illinois at Urbana, your mean score is this, and your sub-area scores were this, and that doesn't meet our expectations, so you guys are on double secret probation until you improve the quality of your program, or something like that. So it's consequential to the university level, at a program level, with the folks aggregated as opposed to this individually, like you as a person, pass or you don't. But this is, I don't know what you can say about Illinois. This is where we are. So I wanted to talk a little bit about who's involved, because one of the most controversial, one of the things I hear and I read in blogs and stuff like that is Pearson, and Pearson is oppressing us, and Pearson is taking over the world, and they may or may not be doing all of those things. But if you want to be angry at Pearson. If you want to, you can't do it on a TPA's account legitimately necessarily. Let me tell you about who does what with this particular assessment. So I mentioned the Stanford Assessment Center. They have retained complete control over the development of all of the content of this assessment. They prepare all of the materials for the scorers. They train the scorers, they review the data, they do all the revisions, they prepare the candidate support materials, they prepare the university support materials. The Stanford Center, and they do this using, they have a kind of a couple of tiers of stakeholder groups that are approximately equally composed of K-12 educators and teacher educators. So if you went to their summer revision meeting where they all get to, half of the room is going to be practicing K-12 teachers, the other half is going to be teacher educators. And their Stanford staff will guide this team in looking at the data, making revisions, deciding how to organize questions, thinking about what questions are candidates being asked to respond to, all of that sort of thing. Pearson at no point is involved in the development of the questions or the materials or or scorers training or what scorers look for or the process used in scoring at all. They really aren't.
I trained to be a scorer and it was all Pearson.
So what Pearson does is deliver it. So they do deliver, and they hire people.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you apply through Pearson's human resources, and their human resources uses the criteria developed by Scale to select the people that they hire. And then you log in through Pearson's scoring system, through Pearson's infrastructure to participate in the training activities and the training materials. But all of the materials that you read and all of the practice things that you scored, all of that was developed by Scale.
Right.
So Pearson administers it as a technological interface, and clearly there's some organizational things that, they take up the assessments from the students. So this website where teacher candidates upload their assessment is a Pearson website. And Pearson takes responsibility for distributing the assessments to the scorers and saying, you're going to get these 10, and you get these 10, and you get these 10, and you get these 10. But once that, and then the other thing that Pearson does is manage the score results and the distribution of those to the candidates and to the universities. So when we get our score dump, we get it from Pearson. Pearson handles setting out the scores, but in terms of the decisions about how the quality of scoring, the criteria for scoring, all of that is Scale, and Pearson is not involved. So, take it, it is what it is. And, related to that, I often hear concerns about, Pearson's gouging, and they may or may not be gouging. I don't know. I can't say that they are or not. I can tell you that a very similar test is being developed and is probably past the pilot stage now by ETS, which is a competitor of Pearson, and is working with the faculty at Michigan State. And it's very similar to the demands of this assessment. It's currently costing candidates $450 for that assessment to be scored, and that includes about a third of it, which if you're the first part of it, of the assessment tends to be things like describing the classroom that you're teaching in, what the materials are, what the lessons are, and here are my lesson plans. In this other system, the university has to score that themselves, and then they send that to the company who scores the rest for $450. So I meant to look up before I printed it, and it totally slipped my mind, what the cost for scoring a national board of professional teaching portfolio entry is. Does anybody know? Okay. It's at least, I think it's way more than $300, and again, it's
$2,500.
Yeah, yeah. So, you can, $300 is certainly a lot of money when you're a university student or a university student's parent. I'm not suggesting that it's not, whether it's reasonable or unreasonable or gouging or not gouging, I don't know. I can tell you those are some points of comparison. And I feel like I'm working for Pearson right now. I'm really not. I really don't. I do get frustrated sometimes because people don't have accurate information. So it's not that I think Pearson is wonderful and I love them and I want to work with them. It's not that at all. It's more that it's important for you to understand with this particular assessment, the logic behind it, the creative control, the technical pieces all reside at Stanford. So if you want to be angry, you don't like the questions, be angry at Stanford, not at Pearson so much. AECTE, which is a professional organization that works with the teacher education nationally, they're engaged in helping distribute resources to higher ed institutions generally. They maintain a resource site and discussion boards and some of those kinds of things that the SPSS folks use to communicate with higher ed faculty across the country. They've also assisted in developing some professional development opportunities and that sort of thing for university folks to get up to speed on the assessment. Yes, ma'am.
The National Board Cost Certification for the 2014-2015 program is $1,900.
Okay.
4 components, each costing $475.
All right. Okay, so yeah, take that's by way of comparison. So people wonder about who scores, and so this is who scores. They hire 50% higher ed faculty and 50% K-12 teachers. To be hired, you have to have met these criteria. Oh, you have to be present evidence that you have expertise in the subject matter by a degree usually or other work experience. You have to show that you have experience working with teacher candidates, that you have recent teaching experience if you're a K-12 teacher. If you're a higher ed person, you have to show that you have current experience teaching methods or supervising candidates, and that has to be in the last 3 years. And then, or administrating, and they verify your experiences. My understanding from folks I know who've been hired is they do call your immediate supervisor. So if you were the worst methods teacher in the entire world, but you had taught methods, theoretically, somebody would have the chance to say, don't hire that woman, she's horrible. Because they do at least attempt to verify the credentials with that. And again, so these folks are hired and then they go through, it's a reasonably extensive training, it's at least 20 hours of training. And then they have to qualify to score by producing scores that have a certain reliability range with their sort of master score. And then they have to re-qualify it at particular points after their initial training. They double score and they back score and they reliability check and they do a variety of other things to try to make sure that the data that they're getting are accurate. So what does Ed-TPA assess? It's intended to be a comprehensive look at teaching, which is really hard to do anytime you're assessing. Because if you've been a classroom teacher, you know you're making hundreds if not thousands decisions second by second every day. Should I go faster? Should I go slower? Should I do more? You can't to capture that in a test or an assessment is an extremely difficult thing to do. So what they're attempting to do here is to slice out one chunk of an instructional cycle and look at that with a great level of detail. With, I guess you have to be able to offer the inference that if they could do this level of detailed analysis of their instruction and the results of their instruction, if they could do it once, hopefully they're going to do it again all the time, every day when they practice as classroom educators. But it isn't, it's not the same thing as a student teaching assessment where your cooperating teacher sees you every day, day in and day out. It's not that kind of an assessment, nor is it the kind that we're used to having, which is kind of a selected response, kind of color in the dot Scantron test. It's kind of in between those two things. One of the main ideas is that they want to make sure that candidates are able to develop through their plans, recognize when they see it in their assessment results, and reflect on what to do with their information about whether students are learning and how much they're learning and what they're doing as they make instructional decisions. So here's, the candidates submit a lot of stuff. That's one of the reasons why the burden feels heavy to them. They submit lesson plans for a chunk of instruction that could be 3 to 5 lessons, hours, days, kind of depending on how you look at it. Video clips of their teaching. They end up submitting not more than 20 minutes of video in 2 separate clips. But to get video that highlights the things that you need to show in your scoring, you run hours and hours and hours of video. And then you have to go back and watch it and look for those pieces that illustrate. So for example, in secondary science, if you get into the rubrics deeply, you'll see that they privilege student inquiry as a methodology. So they want to see students gathering data to answer questions that they have. They want to see students quizzing each other, querying each other, not querying, but talking with each other and discussing data. So it's not the kind of videotape where like this, where I'm standing in front of class and you're taping my lecture on photosynthesis. That would score horribly. That would, they'll need to run video of this group of students sitting over here, and then go back and watch it and try to catch moments of them engaged with each other, talking about the data. Because that's the kind of thing that the science assessment, for example, it's looking for, can they create lessons and activities that allow students or facilitate inquiry-based science instruction, and let's see the evidence of that. So there's a lot of video that you have to wade through to find that 1 4-minute conversation among students to get there. They can also submit other things, or to supplement their lesson plans. They have to submit work samples of their students. It varies by field. In general, they'll pick out 3 kids and then the group. So 3 kids that focus on in greater detail, and then also the group as a whole. So they're going to look at individual kids' work. And that's usually pencil paper kinds of assessments, but it doesn't have to be. In a lot of fields, the student assessment work that they submit, the student work samples is video or audio clips, so it'll be a student explaining how they approached a particular problem. Or it might be a student demonstrating on a board how they handled this particular thing within their group or something like that. So it doesn't have to be like a paper quiz, although a lot of people do that because that's what feels like school is about. Then there's these things they call commentaries. They're long, and I'll be honest, they're very tedious. There's 3 commentaries. Each commentary, it's kind of like a question and answer, like, what were you mostly trying to teach today? Why is that a good idea to teach that? What research supports your choice to teach this content in this way? How did you tailor your instruction to fit the needs of the kids based on your assessment results? Those are the kinds of questions that are in the planning commentary. The kinds of questions that are in the instruction commentary are more like, what were the techniques that you used to develop good rapport with your students? It's not a yes, were your students engaged? Talk about student engagement. How did you get that student engagement happening? Was it where you wanted it to be? If you had a do-over, what would you do differently the next time so that you could get better engagement or more accurate responding or more frequent responding, whatever your target behavior is. And then the assessment piece is looking at how much did your students learn, how do you know they learned that, what would you do differently, if you had the choice. How did you give your students feedback, and how have you taught your students to use the feedback you gave them as they move forward? That's a place where everybody's struggling, our campus in particular is struggling with that. So those are the kinds of questions that the students answer. They sound pretty reasonable, they sound pretty logical. It's heavier technical writing. And in order to get reliability across scorers, they've had to use procedure where scorers are not supposed to go and look back at an answer. You have to read forwards, if that makes any sort of sense. So you can't say, oh, I think they wrote that in commentary 1. Let me flip back and look at that. So that causes them to ask for candidates to kind of repeat relevant information in new questions, if that makes any sort of sense. It makes more sense when you kind of see it in front of you. Students complain like, oh, I just wrote the answer to that, and they did. They wrote the answer 6 pages ago, but the scorer can't look back at that 6 pages ago, so they need to sort of refer back to it again. So it's not a beautiful explanation of their teaching in an essay format. It's technical writing of a kind of a detailed nature. So they do that, and then they turn it in, and I think this is probably they turn it into Pearson now in Illinois, and Pearson scores if they get the answers back. It's only from a teacher ed perspective. It's not the only assessment that happens, and I think that that's an important thing. Right now, it's getting a lot of attention because it's new, and new things are sometimes more difficult, and they cause us to have to change the routines that we've grown accustomed to, and a variety of reasons why things that are new grab our attention. But it's true here on our campus that an Ed-TPA score is one piece of what program faculty look at when they decide to recommend someone for licensure. They're doing regular observations, students are taking other kinds of assessments, and it's true on our campus, and individual campuses make their own policies about this sort of thing. Just because a candidate passes the Ed-TPA doesn't mean they get a license. The ultimate decision for whether a person is recommended for a license it rests with the university faculty. It always has, but they can't recommend somebody who hasn't passed the assessment. So the fact that you pass an assessment doesn't mean you automatically get a license or a recommendation for a license. But someone could pass this assessment, do well on the assessment, and perhaps not do well on some of these other things, and the university faculty can choose not to recommend that person for a license. So it hasn't changed. It hasn't changed that. The other thing, different campuses have made different policies on this, and I think our university has done a smart thing by treating the Ed-TPA like a licensure exam. And so it's, in other institutions, Illinois State, for example, if you don't pass the Ed-TPA, you can't graduate and you can't get your degree. And so then you're stuck because you don't get your score back until the end of April, and you're supposed to graduate 3 weeks later, and now all of a sudden you find out you can't graduate. That was their institution's choice to organize their policy that way, and they have reasons why they think that's a good way to do it. Our campus has chosen to separate licensure and degree. So if that were to happen on our campus, somebody finds out at the end of April that they didn't pass this assessment, their college would work together with their advisor and them to figure out what to do, whether they want to go ahead and write a petition to graduate without licensure, and then come back and finish that assessment and try it again, whether they just want to leave with a degree and no licensure, whether, there's a huge number of options available to them, and that's because that's how we've chosen to structure our policy. We also have our policy set up so somebody could pass student teaching and fail at TPA, or they could fail student teaching and pass at TPA. So we're looking, and again, not every campus in the state has chosen to do that. Some campuses I know have said if you don't get a passing score on a TPA, you fail student teaching. So then all of a sudden that student is out 12 credit hours and has to do it over.
I'm sort of an outsider, so
Mm-hmm.
is this license good for how long?
It's as long as you, as a teacher, you keep renewing it, it's potentially converts to a kind of a lifetime license.
Not a private license that you have to do.
Well, you do have to, no, you do have to do, you do have to renew it. Yeah, you have to do professional
But you
development.
don't have to renew it by taking the test again.
Right, okay, thank you, that's a good point, yes.
What's the correlation between the measures, the university measurement
Because there's multiple measures, we're looking, what I'm thinking through is which one do we want to correlate it with? To what extent does the cooperating teacher's evaluation match an Ed-TPA score? I'd get a different answer there than if I asked to what extent does the university supervisor match, or to what extent does the content test match. In general, on our campus, I can tell you that students in general do pretty well on all of their assessments. So part of it is that folks who were struggling or who needed extra support in a remedial fashion get it early before they get to student teaching. We don't have very many people on campus who don't succeed in student teaching. We have a handful of folks who don't succeed, and we have a handful of folks who needed extra time or additional support or more coaching to succeed, but it's kind of a pass-fail thing as opposed to a scale. So it's kind of hard to equate directly.
Agreement on who.
Yes,
who
yeah,
values.
yes, absolutely. Yeah, we did a pilot, we did some pilot work this past school year, and, so the data that I sent back to programs said, if it were September 1st, here's the people who would have been in trouble. And in every instance, I think except for a couple, those were the same people. The faculty were not surprised to see those names. They were like, I knew that, or they had trouble all the way, or there were a couple of instances where people were surprised to see that person not do well. And I don't think that there were instances, just very informally, where a student teacher who did really poorly in the classroom turned around and did a great job on a TPA. Like when I looked at the students who struggled in student teaching, I didn't make a table or compare their data necessarily, but I didn't find places where there were big opposites. It was also, our pilot data is always a little, this year's a little, you never know, because it wasn't consequential for the students, and because our office was paying for it, the students were being asked to do this work, and they knew that all they had to do was get the darn thing done and turn it in. And so the extent to which we got their best work out of them, I'm sure we didn't. So I'm expecting our pass rates to be even higher. Our campus-wide pass rate is about 95%. For all of our programs, and there was one program in particular that really struggled, and that's a program they scored better than that program area does nationally, and there are some issues within that discipline that they're working out. So if I took that program out, our campus-wide pass score would probably be about 98%. So most of the students on our campus do very well. I'll take it back. They don't do very well, they pass. Because that's a thing I got, that was one of the things when I analyzed our pilot data is we have really, really excellent, smart students on this campus. And if in fact this is important information for candidates to know, and I'm not sure that there's agreement on that across teacher ed faculty, but if we were to say, this is important stuff, this is what good teaching looks like, our students ought to be hitting home runs. We ought to see excellent data. And we're not seeing excellent data, we're seeing mostly everybody's proficient data. So then it becomes a political issue, and can they tell me what to teach to, yeah, and that sort of thing. So I think I hit more or less. I'm going to zip through because I think I hit all of this stuff. Just to tell you a little bit about how it's scored. They have a 5-point rubric. Kind of the target level is this level 3, the knowledge and skills of a candidate who's qualified to teach. So actually the way that scoring works is the scorers reading all of the evidence that they have, and then they go in and they look for a 3. And if they see the 3, then they look up for a 4 and a 5, and if they don't see a 3, then they look down and figure out kind of where it falls. It falls there. If you are to, here's a kind of the same concept kind of presented a different way. All of these, the scales and the rubric anchors are aligned with pretty much all of the other things that are happening nationally. There's a group called in task, which is Interstate New Teacher Consortium, and there's a Danielson framework, which is what forms how practicing teachers in many places are evaluated. All of these things are aligned, and they privilege or value the same things at this end of the rubric. So, yeah.
Question. After you suppose you're a high school math teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and you take this test,
Okay.
you go through all these years, and you get licensed.
Mm-hmm.
What is the licensing for? Does that allow you to teach anything from remedial arithmetic to AP calculus?
Yes and no.
If it's high school, yeah.
Yeah. There are rules about who can teach AP or honors classes and what their endorsement background has to be to teach that. But in terms of non-AP or non-honors, the district can assign you to whatever they feel suits you if you have a math endorsement.
So in the subject matter part of this, there would be some calculus and some trigonometry on these tests.
Well, because this test is more of a pedagogy test, it's more about how you approach the instructional
I
process.
thought you said there was a content thing.
They do look a little, they look at that content that you're teaching. So if that day you're teaching a calculus lesson and you taught it inaccurately, hang it up, you're done. There is a different assessment that theoretically looks comprehensively at calculus and geometry and number theory and all of that stuff, and that they have to pass before they can even start student teaching. So theoretically, they've demonstrated mastery of the math content before they get to student teaching. And I'll use it theoretically because it's a selective response. It's not the world's greatest test, to be honest. Okay, let's see. Here, I pulled out a math rubric if you want to get a sense of, it's kind of a small text. But they developed the language of these things together with experts in the discipline. So, we're looking for conceptual understanding, procedural fluency, mathematical reasoning, and problem solving, because this happens to be a math rubric. If I showed you an elementary ed rubric, they're looking for different things. If I showed you a physical education rubric, they're looking for things that are, for their discipline. So they're looking at slightly different things depending. And so I'm going to jump to some of the potential, this is potentially an educative, if it's approached in the right spirit, a positive thing for students in the sense that they get a sense of what they know how to do, what things are easy for them, what things are difficult for them. It is very helpful for them in helping getting them to start on that process of understanding how they need to learn to talk about teaching with folks who evaluate them, because that kind of teacher evaluation is becoming much more prevalent as opposed to, principal walks in with a checklist. It's really more of a collaborative discussion about your own professional development. So it also gives them preparation for similar kinds of assessments. Theoretically, again, approached in the right spirit, programs could use their aggregated data to identify areas of their program preparation that are doing well or not so well. It's a little more objective by having an outside scorer, all of the reasons, observer, drift, and bias, you see what you expect to see, all of those kinds of things, color assessments done by their own faculty, and potentially we could, leverage this from a professional. There's some other issues too. The high stakes nature and the individual consequentiality, that's the word, in Illinois is that's a concern for me. It is, and I talked about how institutions do that, especially because it's new, and because, I'll be honest and say, here on our campus, it hasn't been embraced across programs in the same level of depth. It's perceived by candidates as an add-on. So in some programs, in some campuses, in some areas, the methods instructors are all over this. And when they teach methods, they embed into their methods courses the similar language that candidates will encounter when they run across these commentaries. It would be hard to teach a methods class and not ask them to do what they're being asked to do on Ed-TPA, to plan lessons, to plan for individual students, to plan assessments. Every methods teacher in the whole world teaches those things. the particular words they choose to use and the way they structure their directions and all of that kind of stuff, the more similar it is to how Ed-TPA asks candidates to respond, the more comfortable that assessment feels to them when they take it. Whether it changes the quality or the content, you know, I can't answer that necessarily. I suppose in some programs it does and in some it doesn't. But in some instances, to students, they've never seen any of those terms. They've never seen the language, they've never seen the commentary, they've never seen the form, and all of a sudden it's given to them in January of their student teaching year, and they're like, yeah, go ahead, your whole career rides on this. Good luck, you know, let me know if you have a question. That, in my opinion, is poor planning by the university faculty.
And I have an issue also with the fact that a lot of students, especially rural students in Illinois, come through very traditional classrooms. And they do observations, but in many cases, they're also observing in very traditional classrooms.
Right.
And then you can't score well on the Ed-TPA
Yep.
if you get in a classroom with a traditional teacher.
Yep, and that's what I mean here too,
Yeah.
by the mismatches in philosophy and approach.
Right.
So I gave that example earlier of what kind of thing needs to show up on your video if you're gonna do well on a secondary science assessment. If your cooperating teacher and your personal experience as a student is science is taught by worksheet packet and I stand here and I deliver it and you memorize information and put it back, you won't score well, absolutely. So the challenge, I mean the responsibility then, it's complicated. This assessment is putting pressure on, I believe it should be on those teacher ed programs to quit using placements that don't reflect the philosophies that they want their candidates to use in their teaching. I can tell, you know, my informal, I'm hesitant to say this on videotape because I didn't ask for permission to share this conversation. So my informal conversations with some of the science ed faculty, I said, you know, what would you like? Traditional placements where students are struggling or the kind of instruction that's valued in the Ed-TPA rubrics? They want their candidates to do the kind of teaching that's valued in the Ed-TPA rubrics. The problem is there aren't enough period or enough convenient student teaching placements where that's modeled. So then what do? You continue to say, well, you know what, we shouldn't have this assessment because it's inconvenient. Or, you know, or should that be a call for you to change and to figure out as a higher ed institution, how can we partner with our K-12 schools to get more teachers providing more of the kinds of instruction we want to see happening. In the meantime, we've got that institutional change lever potentially happening. There are actual real-life kids caught in the middle of this where, you know, they're supposed to teach an inquiry lesson to a group of kids who've never done anything but drill and kill,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden they're on video and the kids will look at them like, what? Talk to you? What? What's the right answer? You didn't, you know. And then the kids act confused and they don't know how to learn yet in that kind of a philosophical setting. So it's I don't have an easy answer for that. It's a legitimate problem.
But are there conversations going on with the state board that these issues, you know, because unfortunately the schools who are going to do poorly on this are the schools that do poorly on all testing. Because testing has kind of, these schools have not caught up with, you know, but now what we're doing is we're punishing student teachers who might end up in a bad school.
Well,
Yeah,
the State Board of Ed would put the pressure back on the teacher ed institution and say you have a responsibility to prepare your candidates well. And the fact that instruction is bad down the road is not a good reason to prepare teachers in that environment.
So you think that they really are going to use the TPA scores against the university?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And not just against the candidate, but against.
Oh, no, yeah, no, I already know.
Okay.
It's a done deal. Yep. Everything but the ranking and sorting is, yeah. Yeah, we'll be accountable every year in the same way that we're accountable for all of our other tests and sub-scores.
But you can't really go into these school districts.
You know, that's where if you look at what national reform is trying to accomplish in teacher education, it's not, we've been operating for many years in many areas on a guest model, like, hello, can we put a student teacher here? That's not the kind of model that the research supports as producing the best teachers. A deeper, more engaged partnership where there's actual K-12 higher ed partnership and candidates are immersed in that kind of an environment is generally associated with students who teach better when they leave. So again, the national and the state policymakers are trying to apply that pressure to teacher ed programs to force more of that to happen. It's at the expense of individual candidates, but they've been asking nicely for 20 years for higher ed to do that, and they've ignored them. So I guess they're applying some juice here.
What are the opportunities for remediation for this? If you mentioned May, so I'm a student teacher, I do poorly on this, and I can't get my license. Well, I found that out. Do you have to get placed again in the student teaching? What happens to you then?
Okay, on our campus, every campus gets to decide how to handle it. So if you're talking to colleagues across the state, you'll say, wait a minute, no, that's not it. So some colleges have decided if a student, they have to take a whole nother semester, redo their whole student teaching. We chose not to do that, and so far, I feel like that was a good choice. What we decided is, we anticipate that the number of candidates who don't pass will be small, and that those candidates won't pass for a wide variety of reasons, that a new whole designated remedial plan didn't make a whole lot of sense. So what'll happen is that person's academic advisor and their faculty program coordinators, it would be maybe Adam or somebody like that at Petzel or Roy Davis would sit down with that student and take a look at their tests, results, where they did well, where they did poorly. Then there's a whole bunch of guidance available to them there that I can help them with. In analyzing this, you can retake it, you can retake one task, you can retake 2 tasks, you can retake 3 tasks. So if it's a simple, the most common place where people don't do well is Rubrics 13 and 14, which have to do with packaging feedback in a way that students can use it in the future and giving specific feedback to students. Those are on our campus are the 2 weakest elements. So what the
That's something that you grow with over time as a teacher. I think that is the most difficult one.
It is difficult, but you can get a proficient.
Right.
If all you do is say, good, you got the answer right. That's proficient. Okay. You know, it's not a high bar. If you just say good, then you get a 2. You have to say you got the answer right to get a 3. And if you actually said what they did well, it was great how you solved for that single variable, and that made it easier for you to plug this in the whatever. That'd be like a 5. That'd be awesome. So,
But unfortunately, some of them actually give improper feedback, and then it's an automatic 1.
right, because so in that instance, if that was the case, which I'm anticipating will be most of the years, they can redo those. They can redo just those assessments. They can look through their stack and find other kids with different work, and they can learn from the fact that the feedback they gave the first time around wasn't sufficient. What was it that I should have given them? And they can redo just that one task and submit it for $100 and get that one rescored and probably get passed and graduated. And they might be, then it's up to them however long it takes them to do that. So they would still go ahead and graduate in May. They might be able, if they got their scores back, they can turn, there's scoring windows every 2 weeks. So the teacher ed programs can decide. A lot of them on our campus are telling everybody, yours is due March 13th. In real life, if you don't turn it in March 13th, that's fine. It just gets picked up in the March 27th batch. So every 2 weeks, a new batch goes. So they would redo that one task, turn it in, wait 2 weeks, or turn it in. This feedback takes 3 weeks to get back. In 3 weeks, they hear whether they passed or not. In some instances, the nature of their performance is so poor that they might need to get a different video clip. Or if it's really, really bad, they might need to do another student teaching because it was awful. And there's no piece of it they can salvage.
So you're saying that, okay, the video I sent in and my feedback didn't work. Let me go back through the 200 hours of video I have and see if I can find a better clip.
That's a possibility. The rules about what you can resubmit are really complex. And I always have to look them up for every specific instance. But in general, yes. There are certain rules. If you're redoing a task 2, you can't submit another clip, which is the video task. I believe you can't submit a clip from the same lesson But what you're turning in is 5 lessons, 3 to 5 lessons, so you could turn in a different lesson from that same series. And candidates are so if what I turned in first was my Tuesday lesson and I got horrible scores on my video, I can't turn in a later in the day clip of my Tuesday lesson, but I can turn in a clip of my Wednesday lesson. And candidates are told at the very beginning, run tape, I tell them, set up 2 or 3 cameras and just tape all day. Put it in your secure storage account until you have your score, because then if you do need to go back and find, you've got the day without doing it all over again.
I'm curious, as you're talking about this, are there rules about how much university faculty are allowed to look over a candidate's submissions before and resubmission?
Yes, there are lots of rules.
And lots of interpretations of the rules.
So the way that they presented this is on a formative basis. As you're getting ready to do this, faculty can pull out every stop. You can do 18,000 practice Ed-TPAs with feedback from the faculty. Faculty can also become actual scorers. They can also become do what's called local scoring, which is you get some training in how to do scoring, like I provide local scoring, so if all of the math faculty decided they wanted to be local scorers of this assessment, they could get trained and they would know what to look for. So faculty can do those kinds of things to increase their ability to evaluate student work in light of that criteria, and they could teach that in their classes, they can embed it, they can look at examples, they can give assignments that are very similar to Ed-TPA, they can write feedback, they can have students revise, edit, look at good examples, bad examples, they can do everything in the whole world up until the one that they're going to turn into Pearson. For the one that they turn into Pearson, faculty are asked to only, ask probing questions. So I can't come up with an example of a probing question that meets our guidelines that would be actually helpful. And that's okay because it shouldn't be. By this time, this should be your work, not your faculty members' work. They've theoretically already demonstrated their skills. So it should be stuff like, have you elaborated fully on this point? Do you think the scorer will be able to see everything? Like if a student just wrote 2 sentences, you as a faculty member could say, think about all of the things that the scorer is going to be looking at in this. Is there any detail that you might want to add? You could say something like that. But you can't say, the theory that you cited is incorrect, or the math solution that you have is wrong.
You can say, am I going to see where you quoted your resources later and reading this?
Yeah.
That's a big one, they just forget to put their resources. They don't have
And that's the
resources.
difference between a 3 and a 5.
Yeah.
That's like a money shot, I keep telling you. So yeah, there are lots of those. And again, it's up to the faculty members to decide how much on board they're going to get with this. And in some programs on our campus, the faculty are busy rejecting it all. And so spending considerable energy to reject it all. In which instance, it's the candidates, the student teachers are kind of swinging in the wind out there because they haven't had the benefit of some of these deeper preparation experiences.
So I guess my next question would be, how much time does our faculty have to help
That's what I
sit down
was
with the students and help them with this? It's something
Well,
they're
Because they felt that their methods courses were full of very rich material, and now they're being asked to take some of that away to help these kids with it.
I think it's a matter of, I think it's an analysis issue and it's going to vary by person and by program. People who, once they've gotten over the change and the rejection of it, tend to come around, not always, but often see, oh, this is what I've already been teaching. It's just different, they're calling it something different. So then they have to decide if they want to compromise their personal academic freedom enough to refer to this as academic language, which is an Ed-TPA term, as opposed to vocabulary of the discipline, which is what their PowerPoint slides have said for 20 years. So they can, so they can choose to say to a student, nothing, in which case the student has no idea that this whole period of time that they spent talking about the language of math and math symbols and how do you read math and how do mathematicians convey thoughts and ideas using letters and symbols and numbers, that which is part of good math instruction is the same thing when you get to your Ed-TPA prompt and it asks you what were the academic language demands. And the student teacher won't know that they're the same thing. So that's A. B is, the teacher can keep calling it whatever the faculty member, whatever they have been calling it, and somebody else at a later date, at a seminar or after some other time will have to help that student translate. When your professor said this, they meant this. When your professor said this, they meant this. When your professor said this, that takes extra time and extra energy because someone has to do that translation for the students, and then students are spending time in class as well as in those translation sessions. Or the fact that option 3 would be the faculty could just use that language from the very beginning and use it in its presentation and then, come to grips with feeling like they've had their academic freedom impinged. So it does, you know what I mean? So university faculty have a lot of control over how much extra work it feels like to the students and to them. But it's extra work. Most college faculty, they don't know this stuff right off the top of their heads. So it is extra time for them. I mean, if I was teaching a methods course this semester and I was using this, I would have to redo a lot of my presentations, a lot of my handouts. I'd have to redo a lot of my assignments. I'd have to redo a lot of things if I wanted to make it compatible with the same language, because I've been teaching the same methods class for 20 years, doing it this way. So it would take time for me to do that, for sure. It would be extra time that no one's paying me for. It's just part of my teaching role.
It's interesting when I talk to very experienced when I talk to teachers to university, they kind of blame the certification and
They blame me personally, it's always good too, yeah.
no, hiding their hands against any change that they would like to do. And even, for example, putting more computation into the program. We cannot because we have agreement with exemption the future of our students in the state. And you speak about it as a forward, as a power forward kind of that pushes the shape for a change.
It can't be, or you can say, I like it how I've been doing it, and I'm not interested in changing, because what I've been doing is awesome, and it couldn't be any better.
They say that I cannot change anything, they think that it takes the power from them to decide,
Yes.
even in what we as society say today is a forward.
Yes, no, that is true, it does. There will be teacher educators and teachers who say, this is not what I believe is good instruction.
Yeah.
And so,
And cooperating teachers in the classroom. We say, we are gonna call this foil, I don't care if you wanna call it foil or not, we're gonna call it foil, my kids are gonna learn how to foil. Boom.
God, I remember how to foil, I survived.
I know, well, but you can't video that lesson.
I don't know. Luckily, I'm not in that.
Oh,
Words
Yeah.
and violence.
foil is not used by
violence.
Oh, I know, what do they call it now?
Okay.
double distribution.
Oh, no, that's what I learned.
There you go.
I
Excellent.
transferred schools, I learned it as double distribution at my first school, and then I transferred and they were calling it foiling, and I had no idea.
First outer and last, that's all.
Yes,
But
It's, because it works. Double distribution can then be triple distribution, or whatever, it's just, and then you are distributing.
So to answer your question, the balance, I don't know that I can answer that on behalf of others. Some of it has to do with how you approach. So for example, at the higher ed level, I'll use literacy instead of math because I just have better examples for that at the moment. Hopefully y'all can imagine. There's different schools of thought about how kids learn to read. And if I were to draw on a continuum, there's some folks who say, you know what? You don't teach kids to read. You surround them with engaging, interesting, fascinating books, and you answer their questions, and voila, they read. It happens. And Italian. Okay, so that's way over here on this end of the continuum. And then over on this end of the continuum, you've got somebody who's like, we are gonna break the, did you know that there are 8 different sounds for the letter A? There really are. I'm not kidding, there really are 8. And we're gonna go through each of those separately, and then we're gonna not read a lovely book until you have demonstrated all 26 consonants and however many different vowels. And then, once you've got all those little pieces, we'll read some beautiful books. Okay, so neither end of the continuum is especially effective. Probably good instruction is kind of, take it, somewhere in the middle, take it. So if you as a teacher educator or you as a classroom teacher are way over on one end or the other of a continuum, the amount of change that this assessment is going to cause you to feel, the amount of pull, is going to be pretty extreme, because it's going to pull you in one direction. It's going to pull you towards a particular kind of methodology. So if the methodology that I value is inquiry-based science instruction, and the methodology I'm comfortable with is lecture, it's going to hurt a lot. Because I got to travel from all the way over on this end of the continuum to maybe about right here. Maybe not this far, but it's pretty far over on the continuum of privileging inquiry-based practice. So I got a long, in the same in math, yeah. So I have a long ways to travel, and it's going to cause me to have to change a lot. So then I have to say, do I believe in this? Or can I compromise? Do I want to go here? And some people say no. I have studied this, I have a PhD in this, and I believe that this end of the continuum is the right way to be. And so there's a legitimate pressure that those people are going to feel, because they're going to feel like they're being asked to teach information they don't believe in, or else let their students fail. And same for classroom teachers. They're going to be, if they believe one thing way over here, it's going to hurt them because their student teachers need to do it something different.
So from your perspective, which is wide and
Yes, wide
overarching.
and not very deep.
Well, but overarching.
Uh-huh.
Do you think with the going away, race to the top, that the Ed-TPA is no longer going to be valued the same as a way to measure teacher quality, or do you think we're just going to have to figure out how to not put kids in bad situations for student teaching? And what do you think?
I think it's the latter. I don't see it's written into the state code in so many different places that it's not going to go away.
Even if it really turns out that we find that rural students who do their student teaching in,
They'll hold the universities accountable. And so for instance, every year I turn in reports to the State Board of Ed, and I have to analyze how students do on all of our tests and take responsibility for those. So on foreign language is an example. Our students on this campus really struggle. There's a culture piece of the foreign language, and the way the test is constructed, it's very bizarre. Feel sympathy for your folks in this, for your colleagues in this field. They'll get about 6 or 8 questions on culture, but it will be all generally one region. So let's say that you're taking the Spanish test. You might get a whole bunch of questions about Latin America. Well, if you did all your study abroad and you took one class about Latin America 3 years ago, you're fuzzy on that, and now all of a sudden, if all of your questions happen to be on Spain where you did your study abroad, bingo, you're going to knock it. And each test date, it's a different set of questions. So sometimes all of the questions have to do with Latin America, sometimes they all have to do with Spain, sometimes they all have to do, so it's, and different, and sometimes you'll take the test twice and you'll get Latin America 2 times in a row, and the content is so broad that it's virtually impossible to study for it. The national or the state average on that subsection is failing, it has been for years. So everybody struggles with this, yet every year when we have to turn in, we have to write extensive reports about our analysis of the students' performance on this culture subscore and how in our curriculum we're addressing their poor performance in this area and hoping to bring it up, and what courses we've designed, to how we've changed here's the syllabus that shows how we included more Latin America, but then whoops, they got the Spain test next time. So we're at the higher ed institution. I will spend a lot of time with our campus level results, which I'll then trickle down to program level results. And so I'll try to put that pressure back on the programs and have them really come to understand how they're preparing people and whether they like it or don't like it.
And do you think with more students taking the test that $300 will come down? Like you say, the
No.
national board is down to $1,900. Of course, when I did it, it was 5 portfolios. It was 2,500, now it's down to 419. But you don't think we're coming down on 300?
I don't. I mean, it could happen, but I doubt it.
The kids say it's $1,000 now to get a license.
It's at
in Illinois,
least.
costs at least $1,000. That's
And
a
they
lot of
just
money.
passed a new criminal background check fingerprint law too, that's gonna increase the number of times they have to go get fingerprinted too. And we can't help it, it's not us. So, yeah. Other thoughts? We've probably gone longer than we're supposed to, though, I don't care. Nowhere to go. So, I think I hit everything that I was,
Well, then, if you have friends who are in education, I don't think students at the University of Illinois have anything to worry about because, I mean, they're the best of the best.
yeah.
There are a lot of universities and colleges that are going to struggle mightily.
Yeah, I'm very concerned. There's one large teacher prep program in our region who's, they only sent, like last year for scoring, we sent hundreds of portfolios to get some pilot data. So we got some idea of, what kind of a pass rate are we looking at? We had sent, not hundreds, but we sent many the year before that as well, to try to get a sense of kind of where are we and what supports do we need to build in and that kind of thing. And to give people some experience with it. There's a very large teacher preparation institution who has sent in 2. And I don't know why, because we even get vouchers for Pearson. I should tell you that, my Pearson Goodwill tour. They actually give us, they give all institutions what they call usage credits. So and it's based on the number of candidates who take tests from your institution. So I don't know how many we got, probably $1,800 worth, or maybe more, of $100 vouchers. And we just ask students who wants them. And so far, everybody who's asked for one gets one. So if you're a teacher licensure student and you didn't respond to that email you got September 4th, saying you want a test voucher, please respond because you'll get $100 towards this assessment. So they are giving back some usage credits, and the institution didn't use those to get kind of results, so I'm nervous for that.
Yes.
We'll see what happens, because they have no idea what their scores will come out with. And I think from a public relations perspective, the first time I was thinking, how's this going to look on the front page of the Tribune? The first ranking tables that'll come out probably about this time next year, they've told us they're going to rank all the institutions of the state based on how well the candidates do on this particular assessment. We'll see.
Well, and I also think most of the students here get to go into good classrooms.
I hope so. I mean, they certainly try, yes. Yes.
Do they do any follow-up taking the same score, exactly 10 years over the enrolled and they check it again and see how does it compare?
With this exact same assessment?
Yeah.
I'm not aware of any, but if you could get teachers to agree to do this twice, that would be an interesting, that would be an interesting study to do.
For a grant, I mean, if you pay them.
Yeah, you could, and actually,
They should have done it because to see what they are doing when they're working.
the same exact assessment, because it's calibrated on novice performance, wouldn't necessarily, you'd have to mess around with it a little bit, because we don't want to know at 10 years out how they calibrate as novices, because by 10 years out, they ought to have expertise in particular areas. But there ought to be there ought to be something we could do to do that. And that's actually one of the whole chunks of slides that I skipped over or that I didn't put in here is one reason that you might want to consider supporting these kinds of efforts is the research potential in terms of correlating with other measures, in terms of looking at the validity of this assessment, first of all, at its use in a predictive fashion in terms of teachers who do well and what kinds of instances do they do. So there are potentially some research questions that this assessment, because it's being done on a national scale with large numbers of teachers, lends itself to. It's hard to sort out though sometimes what's an artifact of the test construction. Like a lot of people are saying this, teachers are very bad at assessment, they're weak in instruction, and I'm not, in assessment, they're really bad at assessment. Because it's true nationally, But it's so true that I wonder if it's an artifact of the test construction,
Yeah.
in the sense that, that it somehow is looking a little harder at that particular piece, where the prompt isn't as focused as it should be. Because I see a lot of novice teachers, and they're not all that bad at assessment. So I think some of it is test artifact. And how to sort that out is the same way you do with any other research effort. It's complicated, and hire people to do that. Anything else?
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you all.